"I canceled my wedding for you," the Apache girl cried, and the rancher held her close. The morning sun rose slowly over the wide, quiet ranch, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air smelled of fresh grass and earth, mixed with the faint scent of hay and horses. The rancher, a tall, strong man with calloused hands and steady eyes, stood at the edge of his property. He loved this quiet, this simplicity. Every day brought work, routine, and peace, and he found comfort in it. He had lived this way for many years, and the world outside his ranch seemed complicated and loud compared to the calm life he had built here. The rancher was not a man who sought company. He was used to his own thoughts, used to silence broken only by the sounds of animals or wind through the trees. He did not dislike people, but trust was something he gave carefully, almost rarely. His life had taught him that some things were best kept simple, and emotions could sometimes be dangerous if they distracted from reality. He preferred to keep his heart steady, like the land he tended. Not far from the ranch, the Apache girl lived with her family. She had grown up with stories of her ancestors, learning the strength, courage, and wisdom that came from her heritage. Her life was full of contrasts, tradition and modernity, freedom and expectation. She had a bright, kind heart, always ready to help others, but she also carried responsibilities that often weighed heavily on her shoulders. Family obligations and cultural expectations sometimes made her feel trapped, as though her own desires were a secret she could not speak aloud. Their first meeting was not dramatic or sudden. It happened one ordinary afternoon when she came to the edge of the ranch with a question about the land. She had a small map in her hands, and she needed advice. The rancher noticed her standing there, nervous but polite. Something in the way she carried herself, a quiet confidence mixed with hesitation, caught his attention. He greeted her with a nod, his voice calm and steady. "What can I help you with?" he asked. I need some advice about this area," she said softly, pointing to the map. "I'm trying to understand how the water flows here, and I thought you might know more." He studied her for a moment, noticing her careful words and respectful tone. He was used to people asking for favors or being loud and pushy, but she was neither. There was something different about her. "All right," he said finally, "let's walk." They walked together through the land, the girl asking questions and the rancher explaining patiently. He spoke about the soil, the water, and the land's natural rhythm. She listened intently, asking thoughtful questions, and occasionally pointing out details he had missed. They worked quietly, side by side, and neither noticed how the hours passed. By the end of the afternoon, the girl felt a strange sense of comfort she had not expected. The rancher's presence was calming, steady. He did not judge her, nor did he rush her. She had met people before who were impatient with her questions, people who assumed she did not understand, but he treated her as an equal. It was a small thing, but it mattered deeply. The rancher, on his side, found himself surprised by his own feelings. He was used to noticing details, to watching carefully, but he had never paid attention to someone in this way before. There was a quiet kindness in her eyes, a mix of curiosity and sincerity that pulled at him without explanation. He did not understand it, and he tried not to, because understanding emotions was never easy for him. Yet even in his careful, disciplined life, he could not ignore the connection forming in those quiet hours. In the days that followed, their paths crossed often. Sometimes it was by chance, sometimes because she needed advice, or he needed help with something on the edge of his land. Each encounter was small and ordinary, helping a trapped calf, fixing a broken fence, walking through the fields to check irrigation. Yet each time, they learned more about each other. He learned that she had dreams that went beyond her responsibilities, and she learned that beneath his strong, silent exterior, he had a heart that cared deeply for those around him. Despite the growing bond, both of them held back. The rancher had learned long ago that feelings could bring pain. He had experienced disappointment, and he feared losing control over his life and work if emotions entered too deeply. He remained respectful and calm, giving help and advice but keeping a careful distance. The Apache girl, meanwhile, was caught in a web of expectations. Her family had plans for her, a path that did not include this quiet rancher, this life of freedom that she secretly longed for. She admired him and felt her heart drawn to him, but she also feared the consequences of following her own desires. She had learned that courage could bring both joy and heartbreak, and the weight of responsibility made every decision heavier. Even with these fears, small moments of connection began to build. A shared smile over a passing joke, a glance across the field when no one was looking, the way he silently ensured she was safe during the long walks across uneven land. These moments were brief, but they planted seeds of trust and affection that neither could ignore. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold, they found themselves alone near the edge of a stream. The sound of flowing water filled the air, and the world seemed to pause around them. She turned to him, hesitant but determined, and asked about the history of the land. He spoke slowly, telling stories of storms survived, of seasons changing, and of the quiet strength required to care for something that gives so much back. She listened, captivated not only by his words but by the calm presence he exuded. She felt a sense of safety she had never felt before. In that moment, the world outside, the pressures, the obligations, the fear of judgment seemed to fade away. All that mattered was this connection, simple and real. The rancher noticed her attention and felt a warmth he had not expected. He had always lived carefully, keeping his heart guarded, but there was something about her honesty, her courage in asking questions, and her willingness to listen that made him feel alive in a quiet way. He did not speak of feelings or desires. He merely stood beside her, sharing the moment without words. As the days turned into weeks, their interactions continued, each small encounter strengthening the bond between them. Neighbors began to notice the way she looked toward the ranch, and the way he seemed to linger in thought after she left. Yet, neither spoke openly about what was growing in their hearts. Both feared the consequences, her family, his solitude, and the uncertainty of emotions that had no easy path forward. Still, the connection could not be denied. They began to anticipate each other's visits, finding comfort in shared work and quiet conversation. She began to trust him with small pieces of her heart, telling stories of her life, her dreams, and her fears. He listened, never rushing, never judging, and in turn, she offered him trust and a glimpse of a life beyond the ranch's borders. By the end of the season, it was clear to both that something important had begun between them. It was not loud or dramatic, but quiet and powerful. It was built on respect, shared moments, and understanding. They had formed a bond neither had expected, and though neither could speak the words aloud, the heart knows when connection grows stronger than fear. The rancher stood one evening, looking across the fields as the sun dipped below the horizon. He felt a sense of anticipation mixed with caution. Life had taught him to move carefully, to guard the heart, but he could not deny the feelings that had taken root. He had met someone extraordinary, someone who challenged the quiet rhythm of his life in the most gentle way. The Apache girl returned home that evening, her heart heavy with both hope and fear. She had discovered a new kind of trust, a person who saw her for who she was, beyond expectations and obligations. She felt joy and anxiety intertwined, knowing that her life could change in ways she had never imagined. Yet she could not regret the connection she had found. It was real, honest, and entirely unexpected. And so, the first part of their story ended not with a dramatic confession, but with quiet understanding. A rancher and an Apache girl had met by chance, forming a bond that would challenge their fears and reshape their lives. In the silence of the ranch, amid the beauty of the land and the steady rhythm of everyday work, two hearts had begun to recognize each other. They did not yet know where this connection would lead. They did not know the choices, challenges, and sacrifices the future would demand. But for now, they had found each other, and in that finding, they had discovered the beginning of something meaningful, a story built on trust, respect, and the quiet courage to open one's heart. Days turned into weeks, and the quiet connection between the rancher and the Apache girl began to grow stronger. It was a slow, gentle bond, built on trust, shared work, and small moments that neither of them could ignore. The rancher, who had always lived a life of routine and solitude, found himself thinking of her more often than he expected. He noticed the way she laughed at small jokes, the way her eyes reflected the sky and the land around them, and the quiet determination in her voice when she spoke about her life. For her part, the Apache girl felt a strange mix of excitement and fear every time she saw him. She admired his strength, his patience, and the calm way he faced life. At the same time, she felt the weight of her own responsibilities pressing down on her. Her family had plans for her future, plans that she knew were practical, safe, and honorable, but her heart began to rebel against them. She could not deny the comfort and happiness she felt in his presence, even though she knew that following her feelings might bring conflict and challenges she was not ready for. Their days together were often filled with simple work. She would help him check fences, feed animals, or walk the fields to inspect the land. They spoke quietly, sharing stories about their childhoods, the lessons they had learned, and the dreams they secretly held. Sometimes they did not speak at all, simply walking side by side in silence, listening to the wind, the birds, and the occasional neigh of a horse. In these quiet moments, a deep understanding began to form, a sense that they could trust one another without speaking a single word. One morning, the rancher noticed her standing near the barn, looking out across the fields. She seemed lost in thought, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her scarf. He walked up quietly and asked, "What are you thinking about?" She startled slightly, then smiled faintly. "I'm thinking about everything and nothing at the same time," she said softly. "Life, the future, choices." He nodded, understanding more than she expected. "Sometimes thinking too much can make life harder," he said. "It's good to take things one step at a time." She looked at him, appreciating the simplicity of his words. There was no judgment, no pressure, just quiet advice offered with care. She realized that this calm presence had become something she relied on, even if she did not yet fully understand why. As their friendship grew, so did moments of laughter. One afternoon, a calf had escaped its pen, running wildly across the field. The rancher chased after it, trying to catch it before it got into trouble, while the Apache girl ran behind, laughing and calling out directions. When the calf finally stopped, both of them were out of breath, covered in dirt and laughing at the absurdity of the situation. "That was ridiculous," she said, brushing the dirt from her sleeves. "You should have seen yourself," he replied, smiling. "You were faster than I expected." In that simple exchange, they shared a rare joy, one that did not come from planned events or grand gestures, but from being present in the moment. These small, shared experiences began to build a foundation stronger than either of them could have imagined. Yet, despite their growing closeness, both of them carried fears that kept them from speaking openly about their feelings. The rancher knew the danger of letting his heart lead too quickly. He had seen people come and go, and he had learned that life could be unpredictable and harsh. To allow himself to feel too much could lead to pain, and he was careful not to cross that line. The Apache girl, meanwhile, faced her own internal struggle. Her family's expectations weighed heavily on her. They had promised her to someone else, a wedding, a future she had not chosen. She had been raised to honor her commitments and respect her family's wishes. To follow her heart might mean disappointing those she loved, and the thought terrified her. Yet, she could not ignore the happiness she felt when she was near the rancher, the sense of safety and understanding that no one else seemed to offer. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat by the edge of a small creek. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the water, and the air was cool with the promise of night. She turned to him, her voice quiet but determined. "Do you ever think about what could be?" He looked at her carefully, reading the emotions in her eyes. "I try not to," he said slowly, "but sometimes it's impossible not to." She nodded, understanding the weight behind his words. Neither of them needed to say more. They both felt the same unspoken question. What if life allowed them to be together? What would that mean, and at what cost? Days passed, and their connection grew more complicated. She found herself thinking about him constantly, wondering if he felt the same way. Every message, every glance, every small act of kindness became significant. The rancher noticed subtle changes in her behavior, the way she lingered near the barn, the way she hesitated before leaving his side, the quiet smiles she gave him when she thought no one was watching. Despite the growing tension, life continued in its usual rhythm. Work on the ranch did not stop, and her responsibilities did not disappear, but their quiet bond gave both of them strength. For the rancher, it reminded him of the warmth that could exist beyond the routine of work and isolation. For the Apache girl, it gave her courage, the courage to imagine a life where she could make her own choices, guided by her heart rather than only duty. One afternoon, a storm rolled in unexpectedly. Dark clouds covered the sky, and the wind picked up, rattling doors and shaking the trees. The rancher and the girl were out in the fields when the first drops of rain fell. They ran toward the barn, laughing at their predicament, drenched and soaked through by the sudden downpour. They reached the barn, breathless and laughing, and took shelter inside. The rain beat against the roof, loud and unrelenting, while they sat together on a dry patch of hay. The rancher handed her a blanket, and she wrapped it around herself, grateful for the warmth. In that moment, the world outside, the obligations, the expectations, the fear, seemed to fade away. All that existed was the quiet understanding between them, the shared laughter, and the safe space they had created together. The storm eventually passed, leaving the air fresh and the ground damp with rain. As they walked back to the house, side by side, the Apache girl realized how much she had come to depend on this man, not just for guidance or help, but for emotional support and comfort. He had become a steady presence in her life, a source of calm and understanding that she could not find anywhere else. The rancher, too, felt a change within himself. He had always been careful, always measured, always distant. Yet in her company, he felt a sense of belonging and connection he had never experienced before. He knew that his life had shifted in subtle ways, and he could no longer pretend that she was just another person passing through his world. But as much as their bond grew, the future remained uncertain. Both of them knew that feelings alone could not guarantee happiness. There were obstacles, family expectations, societal pressures, and the unknown consequences of following their hearts. The Apache girl's upcoming wedding loomed like a shadow over every moment they shared, and the rancher's careful life could not easily accommodate the complications that might arise. Still, they continued to meet, to share quiet moments and small joys. They discovered each other's strengths, fears, and hopes. The rancher learned that she was brave, compassionate, and thoughtful beyond her years. She discovered that he was patient, wise, and capable of deep care even when he struggled to express it. Each encounter, each shared story, each gentle word brought them closer, even as the weight of reality pressed down on them. By the end of this period, their relationship had evolved from casual acquaintance to something far more meaningful. There was trust, understanding, and a growing awareness of their feelings. Yet, neither had spoken openly about love or desire, each cautious in their own way. They simply continued to be present for each other, letting their actions speak louder than words. And so, The second part of their story closed not with a confession or dramatic moment, but with subtle growth. The rancher and the Apache girl had learned to rely on each other, to find comfort and strength in their shared experiences. They had formed a bond that promised more than simple friendship, a bond that could one day change both their lives forever. They did not yet know the challenges that lay ahead, the decisions they would have to make, or the sacrifices they might endure. But in this moment, they had discovered something rare and precious: trust, companionship, and the gentle beginnings of love. It was a quiet, patient connection, like the slow flow of water in a creek, steady and strong, shaping the land around it with every passing day. The days grew warmer as spring slowly gave way to early summer, and with the change in seasons came new challenges for both the rancher and the Apache girl. Their quiet bond, which had been forming slowly over weeks and months, began to face its first real tests. It was a time when feelings could no longer be easily hidden, and both of them were forced to confront the reality of their emotions. For the Apache girl, the pressure from her family intensified. Her wedding date was approaching, and every conversation, every expectation reminded her of the commitment she was supposed to honor. Her parents, though loving, were insistent on her following the plan laid out for her. They spoke of tradition, responsibility, and duty, emphasizing the importance of respecting the path chosen for her. Yet, inside her heart, she felt a growing conflict that she could no longer ignore. She thought constantly about the rancher, the calm, strong man who had become a part of her daily life, who listened to her without judgment, and who made her feel seen and safe in a way no one else had. Every memory of shared laughter, quiet conversations, or simple moments of companionship pulled her toward a life she had never allowed herself to imagine fully. The rancher noticed the change in her. There was a tension in her eyes, a weight in her movements, and a certain hesitation in the way she spoke to him. He understood, without her having to say a word, that something important was troubling her. He wanted to help, to guide, and to be a source of comfort, but he was careful. He knew that pressing too hard could backfire, and he wanted to respect her space while remaining present. One afternoon, as they worked together repairing a fence near the edge of the property, she paused and looked out at the horizon. I have to make a decision soon," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. "I know," he said. "Decisions like that, they're never easy." She looked at him, searching his eyes for understanding. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I don't know if I can follow the path that's expected of me, but I don't know if I can step away either." He remained quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes, the hardest choices are the ones that matter most," he said gently. "It takes courage to follow your heart, even when the path is unclear." Those words lingered in her mind long after their work was done. That night she could not sleep. She sat by the window of her room, the moonlight casting soft shadows across the floor, thinking about everything: the expectations, the family, the man she had grown to care for, and the life she secretly longed for. She realized that she had reached a crossroads, one where her next step could change the course of her life forever. The next day, she returned to the ranch, determination in her steps but fear still heavy in her chest. She knew she needed to speak with the rancher, to be honest about the conflict within her, even if it was terrifying. When he saw her approaching, he could tell immediately that something had changed. There was urgency in her eyes, a mixture of resolve and vulnerability that made him pause. They walked to their usual spot by the creek, the place where so many quiet conversations had taken place. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on her. I can't go through with it," she said finally, her voice trembling. "The wedding, I can't do it, not when my heart is somewhere else." The rancher's eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and concern crossing his face. "Are you sure?" he asked carefully. "This is a big decision." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I am. I've tried to follow the path expected of me, but I can't ignore what I feel. I care about you more than I thought I could, and I can't marry someone else when my heart isn't in it." The rancher felt a swirl of emotions: shock, relief, fear, and overwhelming concern. He had hoped for honesty, but the weight of what she had done struck him. "You canceled it?" he asked quietly, almost afraid to hear the answer. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I canceled it for you, for us, because I can't live a life that isn't true to what I feel." The rancher took a step closer, unsure of what to say. He had never been good with words in moments like this. The emotions were too big, too real, too powerful. All he could do was offer what he knew best: presence, support, and comfort. He opened his arms slowly, and she stepped into them, letting herself be held. She cried softly, the tears carrying months of fear, confusion, and courage. He held her close, feeling her trembling against him, feeling the depth of her honesty and bravery. He wanted to protect her, to make sure that no harm or regret would follow her decision. His heart raced, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to feel the full force of emotion he had been holding back. They stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other as the sun began to set behind the hills. The world seemed to fade away, the worries, the pressures, the fear, and for a moment it was just the two of them together, finding solace in each other's presence. Finally, she pulled back slightly, looking up at him with red, wet eyes. "I'm scared of what comes next," she admitted. "I don't know how my family will react or how people will see me, but I know I can't go back now." He nodded, his voice calm but firm. "We'll face it together. Whatever comes, we'll handle it together. I don't want you to feel alone in this." Her heart lifted at his words. They were simple, yet they carried weight and assurance. For the first time, she felt that she could step forward without fear, knowing that she had someone she could trust completely by her side. Over the next few days, they worked quietly to navigate the immediate consequences of her choice. She informed her family gently, explaining that she could not proceed with the wedding. There was disappointment, of course, and some tense moments filled with difficult questions, but she remained steady, drawing strength from the rancher's support. He accompanied her when necessary, standing beside her, silent but strong, a reminder that she was not alone. The Apache girl also began to reflect on what this meant for her own life. She had stepped away from a path chosen for her, but she was stepping into uncertainty. The rancher had become her anchor, but she knew that trust and understanding alone could not guarantee an easy life. They would have challenges, disagreements, and moments of doubt, but the courage she had shown in choosing honesty gave her hope that they could face anything together. For the rancher, the experience was transformative. He had always lived a life measured by caution and routine, but seeing her bravery reminded him that life was meant to be lived fully, even when the path was uncertain. He realized that love, connection, and trust were worth stepping into the unknown for. He promised himself silently that he would honor her choice by being present, patient, and steadfast, no matter what obstacles might arise. One evening, as they walked through the fields together, the Apache girl looked out at the horizon, the sky painted in brilliant shades of orange and purple. "I don't know what the future holds," she said quietly, "but I know I want to face it with you." The rancher smiled, a mixture of relief and warmth filling his chest. "And you will. We'll take it one step at a time together. That's all anyone can do." The trust, honesty, and shared courage between them had created a bond stronger than either had anticipated. It was not born from grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but from quiet, steady moments of understanding, respect, and care. They had taken the first step into a future shaped by choice rather than expectation, and while uncertainty loomed, there was hope and strength in their decision. And so, the third part of their story ended with a turning point. The Apache girl had made a courageous choice, prioritizing honesty and love over fear and obligation. The rancher had accepted her decision with care and compassion, offering support and presence in place of judgment. Together, they stood at the edge of a new chapter, uncertain but ready, bound by trust, shared courage, and the quiet beginnings of love that promised to grow with every passing day. The days ahead would bring challenges, confrontations, and choices they could not yet foresee. But in that moment, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the wind whispered through the fields, they had discovered a truth more powerful than fear. When hearts are honest and trust is mutual, even the most uncertain paths can be walked with courage and hope. The days after her decision were filled with a strange mix of relief, anxiety, and anticipation. The Apache girl felt as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders, yet a new tension had taken its place. She had made the hardest choice of her life, canceling a wedding that had been planned for months, a path that her family had expected her to follow. And now she had to face the consequences, her family's disappointment, the whispers of the community, and the uncertainty of what would happen next. Despite her fears, there was one thing she no longer had to worry about alone. The rancher had remained steadfast, his calm presence a constant source of strength. He did not rush her, did not push her into decisions she wasn't ready to make, and did not judge her for the choice she had made. Instead, he simply stood beside her, offering quiet support and reassurance. Every glance, every word, every small gesture reminded her that she was not alone, and that the bond between them had grown into something far more significant than either had expected. One late afternoon, as the sun hung low in the sky, the Apache girl returned to the ranch. Her steps were quick, almost urgent, and her hands fidgeted nervously. She had made a decision she could no longer keep inside. The rancher noticed her immediately, sensing the tension in her movements, the mix of fear and determination in her eyes. He set aside his work and walked toward her, his expression calm but alert. "You look like you have something on your mind," he said gently. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke. I need to tell you how I feel. I can't keep it inside anymore." She took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling quickly. "I canceled my wedding for you. Because I care about you, and I don't want to live a life that isn't true to my heart." The rancher's eyes widened slightly, his hands frozen in mid-motion. The words hit him with the weight of truth and the reality of what she had risked for him. He felt a surge of emotions, surprise, concern, awe, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. He had hoped for honesty, but the courage it took for her to say it out loud stunned him. "You canceled it?" he asked quietly, almost afraid to hear her answer. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Yes, I couldn't go through with it. I couldn't marry someone else while my heart belongs somewhere else. I know it's sudden, and I know it's a lot to ask, but I had to be honest with myself, with my family, and with you." For a moment, he said nothing. His mind raced as he processed her words, his heart pounding in his chest. He wanted to respond, to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay, but words seemed inadequate in the face of such honesty and bravery. Finally, he did the only thing he could think to do. He opened his arms and pulled her close. She leaned into him, letting herself be held, letting her tears fall freely. She had carried fear, anxiety, and guilt for weeks, and in this embrace, she finally allowed herself to release it. The rancher's steady presence grounded her, and for the first time in a long time, she felt completely safe. He held her tightly, feeling the tremble of her body against his own. "It's okay," he whispered. "You don't have to explain anything. You've been brave, and I see that. I'm here, and we'll face whatever comes next together." Her sobs softened, replaced by quiet relief. She had feared his reaction, worried that he might be angry, overwhelmed, or unsure, but instead, he offered understanding, compassion, and unwavering support. That moment, simple as it seemed, became the turning point in their relationship. It was not just a confession of feelings. It was an acknowledgement of trust, courage, and the willingness to face life's challenges together. For the rancher, the weight of responsibility pressed on him. He had always been cautious, careful with emotions and protective of his solitude. Yet now, holding her close, he realized that life without her would feel empty, incomplete. Her honesty demanded his honesty in return. He wanted to tell her how deeply he cared, how much her presence had changed him, but he also wanted to ensure that he did not overwhelm her. So he let the moment stretch, letting silence carry the strength of his feelings. After some time, she pulled back slightly, her forehead resting against his chest. "I'm scared of what comes next," she admitted, her voice soft but steady. "My family, people will talk, and I don't know if I can handle all of it alone." "You won't be alone," he said firmly. "I'll be here every step of the way. We'll handle it together. No matter what happens, you have me. You always will." Her heart swelled at his words. They were simple yet powerful, promising support without judgment and love without conditions. She realized then that the bond they shared was stronger than fear, stronger than expectation, and capable of facing whatever life might throw at them. The following days were a mix of challenges and quiet victories. She had to explain her decision to her family, and while there was initial disappointment and frustration, they gradually began to understand that her choice was made from honesty and integrity, not recklessness. The rancher accompanied her when necessary, standing beside her without speaking unless needed, his presence a silent assurance that she was not alone. Meanwhile, the two of them found comfort in small, private moments. They worked together on the ranch, sharing laughter over minor mishaps, supporting each other through physically demanding tasks, and enjoying quiet walks across the fields. Every shared experience reinforced the trust and affection between them, showing that their bond was not based solely on romantic feelings, but also on mutual respect, care, and understanding. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills, the Apache girl and the rancher sat together by a small stream, watching the water reflect the changing colors of the sky. She spoke softly, her words barely audible over the gentle flow of the water. "I never thought I'd have the courage to do what I did," she admitted. "But being honest, being with you, it feels right, even though it's scary." He reached out, taking her hand in his. "Courage doesn't mean not feeling fear," he said. "It means moving forward even when you are afraid. You've shown more courage than most people ever do, and I respect that deeply." Her eyes glistened as she squeezed his hand. She had learned that love was not just about feelings. It was about choices, actions, and the willingness to face uncertainty with someone you trust. That understanding gave her strength and a sense of peace she had never felt before. The rancher, too, learned something vital in those days. He realized that life's greatest rewards often came from embracing risk, stepping into the unknown, and trusting others with your heart. Holding her close, listening to her fears, and witnessing her bravery taught him that love was not a distraction, but a source of strength. It could ground you, challenge you, and inspire you to be better. Their days together continued with quiet rhythm and growing connection. The Apache girl began to find confidence in her decisions, drawing strength from the rancher's support and from her own inner courage. She learned that life could be unpredictable and challenging, but facing it honestly and with someone she trusted made it manageable. The rancher, for his part, discovered that love did not have to be loud or dramatic to be real. It could be expressed in simple ways: listening, helping, protecting, and offering presence when words were insufficient. In those small, everyday gestures, they both found reassurance that their bond was genuine, strong, and capable of withstanding external pressures. One afternoon, as they repaired a section of fence near the edge of the property, the Apache girl paused, leaning against a post and catching her breath. "I'm glad I chose this," she said quietly, looking at him. "Even though it's scary, I'm glad I followed my heart." He smiled, a rare softness in his expression. "Me too," he said. "It won't always be easy, but nothing worth having ever is, and we'll face it together step by step." The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the fields. They walked back to the house side by side, the silence between them comfortable and filled with understanding. No words were needed to express the depth of their connection. The bond formed through courage, honesty, and mutual care spoke for itself. And so, Part 4 ended not with dramatic declarations or public confessions, but with a profound moment of trust, understanding, and emotional intimacy. The Apache girl had shown bravery in choosing honesty and love over fear and obligation. The rancher had responded with compassion, support, and a promise of steadfast presence. Together, they faced the unknown with courage, knowing that the bond they had nurtured could withstand whatever challenges lay ahead. They had discovered something rare and precious: the strength that comes from being honest, the courage to make difficult choices, and the comfort of knowing that someone you trust will always be there to hold you close. After the confession by the Apache girl, life did not immediately become simple or easy. The choice she had made, canceling the wedding, choosing honesty and love over expectation, came with consequences she could not ignore. Family discussions were tense at first, questions and concerns filling the rooms where decisions had once been taken for granted. Friends and neighbors whispered about the change, unsure what to make of her courage or the unconventional path she had chosen. Yet through it all, one constant remained: the rancher. He stood beside her without judgment, quietly offering support whenever needed. His presence was steady, grounding her when the pressure seemed unbearable. He did not speak for her, nor did he take over. Instead, he allowed her to navigate her responsibilities while reassuring her that she would never have to face the challenges alone. Each day, his calm strength reminded her that trust and partnership could be far more powerful than fear or expectation. Together, they began to navigate the practicalities of her decision. The Apache girl met with her family to explain her choice, carefully outlining her reasons. She spoke about honesty, respect, and the importance of following her heart. She acknowledged the disappointment her decision caused, yet she expressed her desire to maintain love and connection despite the divergence in plans. It was a delicate conversation, and emotions ran high. The rancher stayed quietly in the room at times, giving her courage simply by being there. His calm eyes, steady posture, and unspoken understanding reassured both her and her family that her choice was not reckless or thoughtless. Slowly, her family began to grasp the depth of her honesty and the seriousness with which she had made her decision. They still felt disappointment, of course, but they also recognized the courage it took to step away from an expected path and forge a new one. Outside the family circle, life on the ranch continued as usual, yet it felt different now. Every task they completed together, repairing fences, tending animals, checking irrigation, was imbued with a quiet sense of partnership and shared purpose. They had moved beyond simple friendship, yet there was still a sense of learning, understanding, and growing together. They communicated in small ways, with glances, gentle gestures, and simple words, deepening the bond without needing grand declarations. The Apache girl found strength she had not known she possessed. Making her choice had been terrifying, but the experience taught her that courage and honesty could reshape life in ways she had never imagined. She realized that love was not about dramatic moments or idealized romance. It was about presence, support, and shared responsibility. Her heart felt freer, and she approached each day with renewed confidence, knowing that the rancher's steady presence made even the uncertain future manageable. The rancher, for his part, learned the same lessons in reverse. He had always lived cautiously, avoiding emotional risk and keeping solitude as a shield against the unpredictability of life. But in facing her honesty, her courage, and her trust, he discovered that connection could bring strength rather than weakness. He realized that the steady rhythm of his work, once comforting, could now be enriched by shared experience, laughter, and the quiet understanding of someone who truly saw him. One afternoon, they walked together across a sun-dappled field, the gentle wind brushing against their faces. The Apache girl looked around, taking in the beauty of the land and the quiet peace of the ranch. "I never imagined life could feel like this," she said softly. "I thought choices had to be hard and full of fear, but now it feels like freedom even if it's uncertain." He smiled gently, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Freedom comes with responsibility," he said, "but it's worth it. Every step we take, every choice we make matters, and the best part is that we get to face it together." The sense of partnership between them deepened each day. They learned to communicate without words, to anticipate each other's needs, and to support one another quietly but profoundly. Shared routines became a foundation, a rhythm that strengthened their trust and understanding. Feeding the animals, repairing fences, or walking the fields became more than tasks. They became opportunities to connect, to share strength, and to build a life together, step by step. There were moments of doubt, of course. The world outside the ranch had opinions, and some people found it difficult to accept the unconventional path they had chosen. The Apache girl occasionally wondered if she had made the right choice, especially when confronted with whispers or questioning glances. The rancher, too, faced internal struggles, concern for her well-being, fear of outside judgment, and the realization that protecting her might require more than he had anticipated. Yet, each time doubt arose, they leaned on one another. The rancher's quiet assurance and her own growing confidence reminded them that facing life together made challenges easier to manage. They learned to trust their instincts, support one another through uncertainty, and celebrate small victories. Every day became an exercise in patience, understanding, and love in action. One evening, as the sky turned golden and shadows stretched across the fields, they sat together on a weathered wooden bench outside the main ranch house. The Apache girl rested her head on the rancher's shoulder, feeling the calm of his presence seep into her own heart. "I'm glad I chose this path," she said softly. "Even though it's not easy, it feels right." He wrapped an arm around her, squeezing gently. "It is right," he said, "and it will continue to be right because we're facing it together. No matter what happens, we have each other. That's what matters most." Over time, the routine of daily life helped them both realize that happiness was not found in dramatic gestures or perfect circumstances. It was found in small moments of connection, sharing a meal after a long day, laughing at an unexpected mishap, or simply sitting together in silence, enjoying the calm of the ranch. Each shared moment reinforced their commitment to one another, their trust, and the knowledge that they had chosen a path built on honesty, respect, and genuine care. The Apache girl began to rebuild her sense of identity, independent of obligation and expectation. She discovered that courage and honesty could lead to acceptance, understanding, and even joy. Her family, while initially hesitant, began to see the depth of her conviction and the strength of her character. Slowly, the whispers and doubts of the community faded as people witnessed the sincerity, integrity, and resilience she displayed. The rancher, in turn, became more open to embracing life beyond work and routine. He discovered the beauty of partnership, of sharing burdens and joys alike. He realized that life could be fuller, richer, and more meaningful when shared with someone who truly understood and trusted him. Their bond, formed in quiet moments of trust, honesty, and mutual care, had grown into something that would endure, regardless of external pressures or challenges. As summer approached, they began to envision a future together. It was not a future free from difficulty, but one built on shared values, mutual respect, and love tempered by patience and understanding. They spoke of dreams, hopes, and the simple joys they wanted to experience together. Every plan, every idea, every small vision of the future was rooted in the reality of their lives and the strength of their partnership. One late afternoon, They walked to the edge of the ranch, watching the sun sink behind distant hills. The Apache girl took a deep breath, letting the warmth of the evening wash over her. "I know life won't always be easy," she said softly, "but I feel ready to face it as long as we face it together." The rancher nodded, his eyes reflecting the fading light. "And we will," he said firmly, "step by step together. That's the only way to do it, and that's the way I want to do it with you." In that moment, they both understood the depth of what they had built. It was more than affection or attraction. It was trust, honesty, courage, and partnership. They had chosen one another in the face of fear, uncertainty, and expectation, and in doing so had discovered a strength neither had fully realized they possessed. As the stars began to appear in the night sky, they returned to the ranch house, side by side. Their steps were confident, their hearts steady, and their bond unbreakable. The world outside could have opinions, obstacles, and challenges, but they knew that together they could face anything. And so, the story concluded not with a dramatic climax, but with quiet, profound resolution. The Apache girl and the rancher had chosen a new path together, one rooted in courage, honesty, and love. They had faced fears, made difficult decisions, and emerged stronger and more connected than ever. Life would continue with its challenges, but they were ready to meet each day as partners, companions, and friends, with hearts open and trust guiding their way. In the end, their story was about more than romance. It was about bravery, integrity, and the power of choosing what is right for oneself. It was about the quiet strength that comes from honesty, the courage to step into the unknown, and the unshakable bond that grows when two people decide to face life together. And in the warm glow of the ranch, as night settled over the fields and the stars sparkled above, they both knew they had made the right choice for themselves, and the beginning of a life built on love, trust, and shared courage.